My name is Lisa Marie Mushtaq. I'm a journalist and a news anchor, and I work with the BBC. I work across world news and as a broadcast journalist on a programme called Focus on Africa TV. I report mostly on business stories, women, and trade. And I'm also a documentary filmmaker. My latest film was on child marriage and FGM in Kenya. I am also the UK ambassador for the Women in Africa initiative. It's an initiative that helps support African female entrepreneurs. We help support them with finance and provide them with a platform to help grow their brands and connect them with other institutions that might be able to support them. So that's a bit about me. I'm your host and the event moderator for today's webinar by the African Diaspora Network. And if you're new to African Diaspora Network, just a bit about it, or if you're coming back and a bit of a refresh, ADN is a global platform that aims to unite Africans and friends of Africa to foster collaboration and innovation, promoting sustainable development across the African continent. And today, ADN has put on this event, as Annie said, to mark International Women's Day, which was on the 8th of March. So International Women's Day, as many of us know, is a global day that celebrates the social, economic, and political achievements of women. The day also marks a call to action for accelerating gender parity. So today's webinar is based on the United Nations theme for International Women's Day, which is Count Her In, Accelerating Gender Equality Through Economic Empowerment. So according to a McKinsey Global Institute study, advancing women's equality could add $12 trillion to the global GDP by 2025. Yet female entrepreneurs receive only 2%, yes, just 2% of all venture capital funding, despite owning around almost 40% of businesses in the US alone. So over the next 70 minutes, you're going to hear from 5 amazing women in a variety of different sectors. And for the first 15 minutes, you're going to hear from 2 keynote speakers who I'll introduce. And then for the remainder, I'll be in a 45-minute discussion with 3 other ladies, and we will be discussing a whole variety of themes on what more can be done to help support women and get that much needed funding. For the remaining 10 minutes, I'm going to open up the floor. So please do ask any questions that you might have, anything that might pop up into your head that you think you would like to know more about, anything specifically to do with the woman that you hear from that you might maybe want to connect with, or anything that you feel like you might want to share with us. So you can either raise your hand, you can use the hand function on Zoom, or you can write your message into the chat box, and I will endeavour to answer those questions for you. So without further ado, the first keynote speaker is Pauline Kerbel. Pauline is the founder and managing partner, CEO of Afri Prospect and She Equity. Pauline is a gender-led investor and an innovation expert in developing and emerging economies. Through She Equity, Pauline is catalyzing Africa's inclusive growth by investing in early stage, impactful, innovative and scalable women-led and owned businesses in sub-Saharan Africa. So Pauline, I'm going to hand over the floor to you for the next 8 minutes.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning or good evening. I don't know where you're joining us from. It's very nice to be here. Thanks to ADN for inviting me to share what I have learned during the last many years, really catalyzing innovation across Africa, but also investing in women founders on the African continent. So I was tasked to share my insight on the impact of investing in women on gender equality and progress. And I have to do this in 8 minutes. You know, I can actually talk about this the whole day because this is what I love sharing the impact we have seen on the continent. Around how $1, $10, 10K, 100K can transform lives on the continent. So I want to start by sharing some statistics that you probably already know, but I think it's a good reminder to see that what I'm sharing, I'm not just because I'm passionate, actually it's very true. So according to the World Economic Forum, it will take 100 years to close the global gender gap if we continue with the current pace that we have today. So 100 years to close the gender funding gap. Many of us will not be here to see this happening if we don't close the gap now. Women basically still face disparities in education, employment, and political representation worldwide. And in terms of the gender funding gap and also investment, female-founded companies receive only 2% of all venture capital investment. These I just mentioned. What we didn't mention perhaps is also in Africa is the same. It actually gets deeper when you look at the African market. So, and this happens on the African market where actually 40% of the SME in Africa are owned and led by women. And they face today 42 billion gender funding gap. Again, 42 billion gender funding gap. That's the gap between the funding that men on the continent get comparing it to the women on the continent. And the things are not getting better again. So in 2023, the different research showed that women received less or around 2% again in terms of investing across Africa. And this comparing it to men receiving about 85% of funding. So again, this has nothing to do with the fact that the business owned and led by men are better. It's just around who's actually investing in those businesses. So the main reason behind this gender inequity are linked to gender biases, mostly also affinity bias, and also the scarcity of female investors. Basically, there are not many capital allocators in decision-making position who look like me and you here on the call. So this has to change if we really want to, close the gender funding gap. We need to see more people who look like me in a position of deciding who's getting funded. So beyond those numbers, the key question we need to really be asking ourselves is why should we invest in women and why everyone should care about gender equality? Is it about being nice? Is it about justice? No, I'm here to tell you it's actually really a smart business. Investing in women is not just also a good business, it's just smart. Simply put, investing in women is the best strategy to have a catalytic impact on the people and the planet, globally, and even more so on our home continent, Africa. Let me unpack this. So the first benefit that I link to this smart business is investing in women and closing the gender funding gap leads to economic benefit for many, not just the women themselves that you will be investing in. So empowering women economically leads to the greater household income. It improves living standards, enhance economic stability, because also women reinvest in 90% of their revenue in sector and activity that benefit everyone, comparing it to maximum 40% by men. The second benefit is expanded market reach. Women are significant consumers and decision makers in various industries, influencing purchasing decisions not only for themselves, but also for their household and the communities. So basically, investing in women-led initiative and the product could lead to an expansion of market and also the profitability that again will contribute to economic growth of the continent as a whole. The last one, gender equality itself. Closing the gender funding gap is essential for achieving gender equality. The UN SDGs indicates basically that if we want to achieve and accelerate the achievement of gender funding, if we want to accelerate the achievement of SDG, we need to close the gap. Why? Because this helps dismantle systemic barriers and discriminatory practice that prevent women from fully participating in economic, political, and social spheres. And gender equality allows women to thrive and fulfill their full potential. And again, I want to zoom in to, come to Africa as a way to conclude this, my keynote. So in Africa, investing in women is really very crucial if you want to end poverty and but also build an economic and inclusive community in the society. So women contribute tremendously in different sectors, including agriculture, education, and healthcare. And if we can actually invest in the women entrepreneurs on the continent, we can see those challenges being actually addressed in a way that it's done sustainably, but also structurally. For us in diaspora, you probably might be wondering, okay, if I'm seated in London, New York, and Washington, DC, and Singapore, what do I do? Basically, did you know that us collectively, we have sent to Africa in 2022 around 100 billion? Did you know that? All of us collectively have sent 100 billion US dollar in 2022. I couldn't find a statistic for 2023. If you remember, I have mentioned that the gender funding gap in Africa today is 42 billion. So actually, we could end this gender funding gap if we work together and we channel the money together. So at She Equity, this is exactly what we're trying to do. As a member of diaspora myself, US diaspora now in Switzerland, on the way from Rwanda, I decided I can't just watch and continue to discuss challenges women face, the gender funding gap. And I created this platform, She Equity, so we can actually take actions. So I invite you to join me, take actions, because we're already sending money, by the way. We just need to change how we send money. We need to do it intentionally, not in emergency, but to actually catalyze change. And if you think I don't have enough money or I don't know where to start, talk to me. I will introduce you to different type of investors on the continent. But also you can invest your time, you can open doors, you can connect female founders with the global partners within your network. So my fellow diasporian, let's seize our collective power and work together to close the gap. Together we can do it. And I wanted to leave you with this African proverb that says, if you think you are too small to make a difference, you haven't spent the night with a mosquito. If you have done, you know how you can't sleep and the mosquito is so small. Thank you very much. Really great to be here.
Thank you very much, Pauline, and thank you for that last analogy. I'm sure we all know the power of something so small and the impact that it can have. You mentioned quite a few different things, and you brought in some facts and figures about the importance of investing in women and how that investment not only benefits them, but the wider community. So one thing I wanted to just briefly ask you about is, you've mentioned these gender biases affecting funding specifically. What do you think can be done to close these disparities within funding? What support, what strategies do you think would be most important, crucially now, to help move and close that gap?
So I tended to answer this kind of question looking at what we have, right? Because so many ways we can do this, but we need to look at what we have. The last things I mentioned is about this 100 billion that we're sending to Africa as ourselves. I see we are 47 members here. So if we could work together to say, we want to back this initiative and we channel our money, we can actually address that. Also remembering that one of the reasons around this existing gender funding gap is because there are not many women investors. And also women investors who are there, many of them don't look like you, Annie, or myself. So we can either become investors or we can channel our money through investors, realizing that we can also reverse the affinity bias, because if we put our money as a woman to back female founders, then that affinity bias will, level the playing field, and everyone will realize we need to back the best company, doesn't matter who does what. So that's one. The second is we need to also, where we are, to realize that at the end of the day, as long as we're seeing a lot of issues on the continent, people trying to leave, and we always defending, Africa there's so many things happen on the continent, and we want to be on the side where we're showcasing the opportunity. We need to take actions, whether it's small or not. And again, it starts with sending the money, not just in emergency, but looking at, what do I care about? Do you care about healthcare, education, food? There's a startup somewhere that is doing exactly that. You might think that you don't know how to find those startups. We can support you to do that, right? So intentionally sending money and using your voice to advocate for gender equality, but backing that with actions, I think it gives us credibility as a women diaspora to get other people to come with us and take action to close the gender funding gap, especially in Africa. I'm biased for Africa, I must admit it.
So it's about everyone actually coming together with a common goal, but also taking action. Pauline Kerbel, thank you so much for your insights and for taking the time to join this important discussion today.
Thank you.
I'm now going to introduce our next keynote speaker. It's Tochi Gini-Gemi. Tochi is the founder and managing partner at Mesh, a full-service consultancy in Nigeria that provides venture building support to founders and investors across Africa. She is an economist with over a decade of experience in operational roles across diverse industries, including pensions, investment banking, FMCG, and venture capital. From managing multi-million-dollar budgets to executing high-stakes campaigns, Tochi's experience spans the fields of finance, entrepreneurship, and social impact. Welcome, Tochi. I will hand over the floor to you.
Thank you so much, Lisa Marie, and hello to everyone who's listening. It's such a pleasure to be here. Many thanks to NEA and her amazing team for putting this event together. I think events like this are very important for us to share and amplify causes that are important and crucial to our progress and our development. So this is really a stepping stone. When issues of women's empowerment comes up in the media, in corporate spaces, it's usually met with varied views. On one hand, sometimes it's received positively and it leads to collaboration and cooperation. But every now and again, we do find that these topics, which are so important and so crucial to us, is sometimes met with polarized views or reviews, especially in the media. And when I was thinking about the keynote and what my intention really for this delivery is really to sow ideas, to sow seeds of ideas, of ways that we can think about how we can accelerate women's empowerment through strategic investments. And the word strategic investment is really important because when we deploy capital strategically, there's an objective behind it. But more importantly, it's with a long-term view. So many times it forces us to think of creative ways to meet the objectives that we've laid out before us, but in a way that is holistic and that fosters collaboration. So I really intended for this to be a conversation, and I know it's ironical because I'm going to be doing more of the speaking, but you can reach out to me on LinkedIn if we don't have sufficient time at the end of this session, and I promise to read every message that comes in from this event. So as I said, the topic I'll be speaking on over the next few minutes is really around how can we empower women through strategic investments. And when we think about empowering women, or if I ask a question, as a woman, how empowered do you feel? We can all agree that empowerment is sometimes in a spectrum, and it depends a lot on the context. Certain days you may feel more empowered than other days, and depending on whether you're on the continent and in certain parts of the continent, or you're a woman in the diaspora, your levels of empowerment might be different. So I thought, how can I deliver this in a way that everyone on the call, everyone in the audience would find the points that they resonate with or that they can reflect on? So I flipped the topic on its head, pardon me, Annie, but if instead of thinking about empowering women and what does empowerment look like, I thought I'd ask, what does disempowerment look like? Because I find that that's something that each of us at one point or the other can relate to or have felt. And And the two words that really came out when I was doing my research and just reflecting was number one, constraint. And the second word was really around dependence. So constraint means to inhibit, right? When we think of being constrained, it means we're not allowed to spread our wings. We're not allowed to really enact or act out our ideas. And so I thought, what are all of the events, or what are some of the events? What are some of the patterns that keep feeding this feeling of constraint amongst women on the continent and even outside of the continent? And how can we unpack each of these issues and then use strategic investments as a tool to solve them? So as we know, with every multifaceted issue like women empowerment, there are different layers. The first layer would be around events and patterns. What are the events that occur in our lives and lives of people we love, in the society, that leads us to feel constrained? All of a sudden, it feels like we can't really act out our feelings, or we can't really share how we feel. And what are the ways in which these events or patterns are being reinforced by systems, by values, by beliefs? And how can we use investments as a tool to slowly but surely start to disintegrate these spaces? One of the examples I have here when I think of constraints is around financial access. And Pauline mentioned earlier, one of the reasons why female entrepreneurs, especially on the continent, find it hard to access capital is because there aren't many female fund managers. So that's what we see. We see that there aren't many female fund managers. But what are the systems that are preventing more females from becoming fund managers, or from learning about deploying capital, or learning about fundraising, or expanding their networks so that they're able to do this? Already there's some progress being done. The stats as it lies today is still sobering, but we can admit that there is progress being done. Last year, 27% of VC investments were made to startups that had at least one female founder on the continent. And I can say that's remarkably higher than the stats that we're seeing in other continents. So kudos to the female managers, female fund managers on the continent, who I know put in a lot of hard work to ensure that they adopt gender lens investing philosophies and principles and theses into their strategies. But we still have a lot of work to do. Another way to think about it is, how can we ensure that investment funds equip women with transferable skills so they don't feel constrained to work at a certain job or at a certain career? And I'll flash back to 2020 during the pandemic, when the hospitality industry, the tourism industry, for example, were one of the worst hit by the lockdown. And we find that women were disproportionately affected because women tend to occupy those kinds of jobs. So strategic investments into those sectors can make those sectors more resilient, so that if there's any external impact or macroeconomic impact, women are not disproportionately affected. A third example I would give on how we can make women feel more empowered by making them feel less constrained is investing in research. That's something, I have to be honest, that we haven't done very well on the continent. I know exactly what the numbers are in terms of the wage gap in the US. I know what the numbers are in Europe. I cannot tell you categorically what the numbers are in Africa. I can say, for every dollar a man earns in the US, a woman earns between 65 to 77 cents. I don't know what that number is in Naira and in Kobo, which is our local currency here in Nigeria. So investing in research enables those who mobilize capital and deploy capital to make more informed decisions. And again, if there's anyone on the call who is not sure how to help, or who's interested in investing in these areas, please reach out to me on LinkedIn and we can take the conversation further from there. A good resource I'd like to share with the team is a book by Caroline Perez. It's called Exposing Data Bias in a World Designed by Men. It's a great resource. I encourage everyone who can to read it. I'll move on to my second point, which is around how can we make women feel less dependent? And I'll give a story, a personal story from where I live. I'm currently based in Lagos, Nigeria. I just moved back from the UK. And I know that it's getting increasingly difficult for women to purchase, to get a lease, to rent houses in Lagos. And this is an issue that has been brought up over and over again. Women that are not married or that don't live with their families are finding it increasingly difficult to rent houses. So that's another way that we can use strategic capital to empower women by investing in real estate projects that remove these unnecessary biases and allow women live more fulfilled and more empowered lives. But you don't have to directly invest in the real estate sector. There's an interesting study by the IFC, which I absolutely love, and I encourage everyone to check it out if they can. The study is called Gender Segregation in Transportation and Ride Hailing. And what the study did is it went to a number of countries in Africa and outside of the continent, and it interviewed people on how ride-hailing apps such as Uber helps them feel more empowered. And women said most of the respondents said they're able to go about their businesses and their day without being dependent because they know at the click of a button, they can get a car, they can get a taxi, an Uber, they can ride and perform their duties. So strategic investments in innovation, even though this is not often discussed, but strategic investments in innovation can also be used as a tool for empowering women. And this is the lens that we want fund managers to think about. The final point I have here is around government spending and what the government spends on. So as we know, government spending on infrastructure is typically considered investments, but spending on social infrastructure like childcare is considered a cost. Now, what does this mean? This means, in this case, women are not dependents, but they are the caregivers.
Sorry to interrupt you, Tochi. You were making some amazing points. You've touched on the constraints, you've touched on dependency, and also the fact that we do actually need a lot more research on the continent. I'm just conscious of the time, so thank you so much for sharing your insights. And I think quickly, if it's possible, maybe within 30 seconds or less, I know as the founder of Mesh Network, you've played a significant role in connecting entrepreneurs with potential business partners. From your perspective, what are some of the key factors that contribute to the success of partnerships between women entrepreneurs, and how can platforms such as yours help facilitate these collaborations effectively?
No, thanks. That's a great question. One of the ways that we can help is one of our services is helping connect female entrepreneurs on the continent with strategic investors. So for example, we offer fundraising services. Many times when entrepreneurs come to us, they can say, oh, I need capital for my fund, but I don't have any collateral, so I can't get a loan from the bank, or the interest rates at the banks are too high and is not sustainable for my business. They don't have access to, impact investors, for example, and that's where we come in, just telling them all the different funding options that are available and which funding options are best suited to their type of businesses.
Tochi, thank you so much for your insights. I think you've left all of us for food for thought. So Pauline and Tochi, thank you so much. And we appreciate the fact that you've taken the time to take part in this and share the knowledge that you have. So that leads me on to the next part of this webinar, and the theme of this discussion is empowering change, financial investments in women across sectors and nations. I'll be in conversation with three businesswomen. The first woman is Ama Gayampo. Ama is the Director of Strategy at the non-profit social justice grant maker Scale Up Africa, and she serves on the National Advisory Board Impact Investing Ghana. She also provides strategic advice to stakeholders on how to deploy social impact capital and disruptive innovation strategies to help solve mass market challenges. We also have Rhode Malivert. Rhode hails from Haiti. She journeyed to the United States at the age of 12, commencing her professional career as a chemical engineer. Rhode's aspiration was to catalyze positive transformation in people's lives. Following a span of 14 years in the corporate realm, her entrepreneurial spirit birthed the genesis of K-12 Preparatory Academy that focuses on the educational empowerment of learners. K-12 Academy has extended its reach to distressed corners of the globe, collaborating with organizations in Haiti, Dominican Republic, and Poland. And finally, but not least, is Kelly Bentley. Kelly is the CEO of DX5. She is the co-founder and chief rebel at the South African company Rebel Element, which merged with CIO Africa this year to form DX5. She has also worked as a senior road traffic accident claims advisor at Accident Advice Helpline and as a marketing events manager at Chief Nation. She then joined McDonald Butler Associates as a senior account manager, then later a client service director for Africa. Kelly is enthusiastic about making a difference in Africa and is seen as a mentor and someone to look up to by upcoming women in the industry. Thank you and welcome to you all. I want to just dive straight in and get started with this important discussion. I've been looking forward to all of this. So Ama, I'll come to you first. So as someone who is deeply involved in promoting impact investing, what specific strategies have you found that have been effective in encouraging financial investments in women-led initiatives?
I think we've touched upon, encouraging more female founders and capacity building around that. How do we equip more professional women with a propensity to invest and guide, female-led investments to create a career as angel investors or fund managers? So we've been very active in trying to create those kinds of ecosystems and encourage that, that pipeline to also grow and feed into broader opportunities in that space. So I think that those kinds of capacity building and intentional programs are really key to just push more women into that particular space to address the lack of women in the supply side of financing.
So I would like to then just go to Rhode. Let's look at a bit on education. The United Nations, I saw an estimate saying that it said that 365 million children globally are out of school, and 31% of those are in sub-Saharan Africa. Now, considering the work that you do, how do you believe financial investments can be utilized to address educational inequality and empower girls and women globally?
So I can speak from a personal experience. Our purpose at K-12 Preparatory is to provide access of quality education to students, parents across the globe, no matter what their socioeconomic background is and their location is. So we partnered with organizations who receive funding from NGOs or personal investors in places like in Haiti and Dominican Republic, where they're basically war-torn countries, to provide laptops, internet access to students. And the same thing here, even in the US, we have that as well in the US, where we have students who cannot get access to quality education because of their socioeconomic background. So we work with organizations to either provide tuition-free program to those students and donate laptops to them, and also get them access to internet connection. And another thing that we rely on from the education sector with us being private, we sought to go after state funding. So one of the things that we are doing right now is we're trying to become the first African-American led women's school in the state of Florida to get the approval of the state to be free to over 1.5 million kids in the state, so that we can provide free private education to those students who can't afford a private tuition. So I believe that it's more of a either personal investment where you find an investor who does impact investor, and also your own due diligence, going after local and state government funding to help you propel the goal moving forward.
So it's about diversifying where you're able to get that funding. And that now leads me to Kelly. So you have quite a diverse career, which spans various industries, and you're now CEO of DX5. How do you think can cross-sector collaborations enhance the effectiveness of financial investments in empowering women?
That's a really good question. Thank you, Lisa. I think the cross-sector engagement is really important. I think technology, is an absolute catalyst to leveraging financial investment. So we focus purely on the technology side of things and building communities across the continent. But one of the things that I always see that's lacking, and we had a situation last week where there is a lot of appetite from an investment perspective, but how that investment is used correctly often falls down, and it's not leveraged well enough to empower women, but also girls. I think we should be going right back to the girl child and talking about how they're empowered right from where they're very young, and giving them independence. Tochi to talk about this empowerment. I think they're disempowered from a very young age. So the cross-sector conversation is very important, and I think you need to have multiple stakeholders from many different industries talking to give a holistic view to how you empower a child, a girl child, right from when she's little all the way through her teenage years. One of the things that Rode mentioned was giving a laptop. They need to understand how to use one. That change management in the business sense is what we call it. But how do you educate and uplift with the end in mind?
So you've mentioned there having those multiple stakeholders. Anna, I'll come to you. So in your experience, you've advised stakeholders on deploying social impact capital. What are some of the common misconceptions or barriers that investors have regarding investing in women-led businesses, and how do you think they could be best addressed?
Oh, wow, that's a really good question, but it's complicated because it comes into, I always take a demand and supply approach. So on the demand side, all investors know pipeline is a general issue across the board, the good quality businesses that we should be investing in. And I always say in Africa, there's so many basic needs that are not met. So many people aspire for just basic services that do not exist, right? And people are just managing. So those are the business models that have not been unearthed yet. They're diamonds in the rough that no one's really paying enough attention to. I think I'll play devil's advocate a little bit and say that, a lot of the incubation and acceleration services that we've been seeing don't necessarily translate to more VC funding because of some of these reasons. We need to look at the fundamentals and look at, the business case, the demand, the untapped demand. We've seen mobile money and fintech in Africa explode as the number one in the world because of the need to just send money home, or just call your parents or call your folks back home. It's just such a basic need. And that's why it exploded in that way, bypassing and leapfrogging the traditional banking system, for example, in other parts of the world. So I think we should look at this from the two sides, not just from the investors. Investors are obviously still very, the power heavy. So a lot of sort of global north talking down to the global south, and it's not always very conciliatory. It's almost a bit antagonistic sometimes in having these conversations. So I think there's a lot of space for the power dynamics to shift, to really deploy more local relationships and work with local financiers and microfinance institutions, women's groups, credit lending, all of those different tiers of funding that exist that maybe could be ripe for innovation or disruption in some way. These are all really fundamental problems that the African consumer and the marketplace can really offer benefits to both the consumer and the actual investors as well. So I think we need to kind of look at all of those angles beyond just the investor side.
And so for Rhode, I'm going to direct this to you. How can investors and financial institutions be then incentivized to allocate more resources toward women-led projects? Considering you said you've reached out to the government, you're hoping that you'll be able to launch this first of its kind school. Is there an incentive that's needed there?
I believe that with knowledge comes power and freedom. So I think that being able to be at the table with the right people and have the right conversations, that's the access that is hard for us to have, is being having the opportunity to speak with the right people who shares the same values. Like for us, we want to make access to quality education free to everyone. But what is how do we find the right investors or the right banking partner who sees that vision as well to help those communities? And most of the communities that are impacted are Black and brown communities or migrant immigrant communities. So having investors that are passionate about elevating those communities is where we have the lack of connection between the synergies. We don't have the access to connect with those people so that we can partake our vision to them and they can see what the future can be like when those communities are positively impacted.
Thank you for that, Rhode. And Kelly, I'll just go on to you. You, as I mentioned, you've worked in a variety of different places. But what specifically led you to get into the industry that you're currently in now?
So Lisa, I think from my perspective, working in the tech space is kind of where I've started and where I've kind of grown up. So the last 20 years, I'm Zimbabwean. I am, have been through being thrown out of my country and out of my home on several occasions. And I think I've experienced what by no means to the worst degree, but I've experienced what it feels like to be disempowered, I think. And, I've got a little girl and I see the world that she's going to grow up in. I'm very passionate about the continent. And I think creating communities, one of the things that Rose just mentioned is how do we connect the investment to the people that require it? Like, I think that's always an issue. How do we create the platforms for these smaller organizations that need the investment, that need the micro lending? How do we connect them to the right people that are genuinely invested in their growth and not kind of looking for the next buck, because Africa is a complicated place for investment, my business is based in South Africa, and we've got a big contingent in Kenya as well, and some in Nigeria. And there really is this cultural difference between each country. You have to really understand what's required in that space and where the needs are. I think Emma's point about really understanding where the needs are and matching that. The supply and demand is absolutely critical. So for me, getting into this space and creating communities and creating a platform where these women-led organizations can come and talk about what they are looking for and how they're trying to grow so that we can connect them to a variety of organizations, not just investors, but people who can perhaps support them in other ways as well, for me, that's really important. I think that's the role I can play, a megaphone, for want of a better description. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting looking at how diverse the continent really is and how just humongous it is. And Rhode, considering the work that you do now, the educational platform that you has is across a variety of different countries. So how, in your words, how do cultural attitudes towards, I guess, women in leadership and entrepreneurship vary across those sectors? I know you're specifically on education, but you've taken it across the globe. So what's your own experience been like?
It has been positive and negative. I would say within the U.S., we've never really had much issues. But once we start expanding out, then being a female founder and also being a woman of color plays a big role on how potential investors and potential partners see us, and has impacted us in a negative aspect as well. So that's why I want to go back to the previous comment I made, is finding the right people who shares the same value and who have no gender bias, no color bias. All they see is the passion, and they see the positive impact that your vision, your company will have in the continent, in the country, the community that you want to put your business in and grow your business. So one of the things that we also do is we help women get their high school diplomas. So we pour money out of our own pockets in some countries, because we can't get investors, to help women get their high school diplomas so that they can be financially independent. So I think finding the right partner who shares the same value would really help us expand the vision globally. But that's the difficulties that we run into.
Thank you. And I'm going to go on to Amma and ask you, I guess, a similar type of question that I just asked to Rode. Considering the work that you do with Scale Up Africa, the work that you do with stakeholders, have you experienced personally any type of bias, cultural bias towards yourself because of the position that you have?
Yeah, it's we're all diasporans, so I have an affinity to West London and West Africa, right? And I can see both sides and how the dynamics work when I'm working or having conversations from different places. I can speak to my own experience having built Scale Up Africa since 2020. The amount of projects we've been able to deploy and execute with our community of stakeholders in communities, especially women, to build their skill sets and mindsets, their access to markets and potential financial and non-financial support. It's been really difficult. I mean, if you look at how much we've done and the outputs of what we've done compared to how much budget we've actually had, I mean, Rode referenced, dipping into her own pockets to kind of just make it work. And I know that, we're not alone. This is a very common story. You hear people just burning out. They're just trying their best to just make a difference. And they're just chronically underfunded and over-mentored. You get all these weird programs and fellowships and workshops and teas and coffees and lunches. And it's like, sorry to say, show me the money, because you've proven your model works. You've invested in that early stage, just like a startup. If you're a nonprofit, probably K12 Prep is a nonprofit. Scale Up Africa is now a nonprofit. You do so much work over so much time, and the resources are just like, if you look at our projects paid on our website, you'd be shocked how much we've actually raised or actually pumped in with our own resources. It's actually doing a lot of great work with very, very little. So I can only speak from that point of view, that it's just not been an easy ride. And, we talk about the old boys club with guys just getting money willy-nilly on, a paper napkin idea for a startup, which will bomb in and cost people loads of money and, cause harm. And, people just bet on these ventures all the time. But it's very difficult to even understand that when you're doing work that can actually help people, planet, and society, in a way that can also, lead to financial returns, but it's just incredibly, incredibly difficult and unnecessarily so.
So you've spoken about the work that it takes to actually put in to get a company off the ground, but I want to look at the personal impact it has on everyone. Kelly, anyone in any type of career, especially if you're put in full-time or if you're an entrepreneur, they're often fraught with challenges. Can you share a pivotal moment within your own career that maybe you suffered some sort of adversity? I know you mentioned Zimbabwe and being kicked out, but I would like to hear your own journey. Maybe something happened that you were able to navigate from and maybe emerge from it stronger.
Yeah, absolutely, Lisa. I think so one of the things I feel very strongly about with investment into female entrepreneurs is that everybody has a personal story, and often I find sometimes even when you get funding, it's quite scary because you know where to spend the funding, but it's all linked to you so personally. So it's not just about your work, it's so much more than that. I think for me, this is my third startup that I've built or am building. And my personal life has been, I've been very ill. I this time last year I was fighting for my life. And I think as a woman, I think you come across so much bias, just having a baby. Oh my goodness. I mean, everybody says that we're like all open to having kids. We really are not. Like, it is, you get so left behind. And I spent 8 months in hospital, and I lost a large part of my life, about 4 years, in fact, from when I was diagnosed to then, and I found that coming out, the trauma was not having faced my end on more than one occasion. The trauma was feeling left behind. And I am still dealing with it now. I mean, it's only just been a year since I actually fully came out, but being left behind from a career perspective, and being left behind from like a funding perspective, and I hadn't built the business enough because now I still have to kind of catch up. And I think that's something that I think as funders, Rhodes said, you need to be fully invested in it. Your values need to align. You need to find investors that forgive my language, but actually give a shit, because it's very hard. And these, people go, Emma's just mentioned it, they do all these parties and they do all these teas, and they talk big language. Well, we've actually got work to do. So, either commit or get off the bus, and I think for me, I think one of the things that I think we mustn't take for granted is that when women are starting a business or even are working in a business, their personal lives have an enormous impact on how they deliver. They might have all the funding in the world, but they are struggling to keep everything else alive. So it's not just funding that they need, it's that whole picture. And that's why I think starting and teaching girls from very young how to cope is really important. So I didn't go into it too much, but I hope that gives you a bit of, I think resilience is grit, all those wonderful words.
Definitely resilience and grit. And thank you so much, Kelly, for sharing that personal story. I just want to put this question out for all of you. Maybe you might be able to chime in. What you've all mentioned, the facts that, the work that you do, you go out, you try to get investors. Sometimes it's just window dressing. Sometimes it's just talk. You just want to get to the nitty gritty. And there's been a consensus that some other people might have it easier, but what do you think can actually be done, for someone who might be new starting, who might be tuned in, listening to this? What can be done to actually get those investors on board? Because all of you, respectively in your careers, have got funding, have got support. So what advice would you give?
I mean, for me, I would say we are still bootstrapping. Okay, so we have not received investors, and there's a reason behind it. As you can see, our logo is a phoenix, and it's because I was fighting for my purpose, and my purpose is K-12 preparatory. And we had a previous school, very successful, and we just had a bad partnership. And with any business partnership, it's like a marriage, and separation is not easy, and the child that suffers is the business. So I think us women, we tend to put ourselves in a silo when we go through these situations, to not, I guess, share it with other people, like not showing your scars. I saw this meme on social media, this woman beautiful in the front, like all these people are cheering for her, and then her back is like bleeding with slashes. They don't see our scars. So I think being vulnerable and being accessible to other entrepreneurs, women entrepreneurs, to explain to them what the journey is and how the journey has been for us, and also what do you look for in an investor? How do you find the right partnership? When should you partner? When should you start taking in investors? Because sometimes it may be too early for you to take an investor. You may still have to bootstrap until you yourself, you feel ready. Because the way I look at K-12 preparatory, for me, it's like a child. And you have to think about, do I want to share that baby that I just had with a complete stranger? And when should I introduce my child to another stranger? So I think that being open and accessible to new entrepreneurs and having a platform where we can all be vulnerable and not be judged because of our vulnerability. And I think that's another thing too, is people tend to judge on the negative aspect when you share your scars and your journey, and they look at it as weak. But in my opinion, I think that your scars prove who you are and how resilient you are in your business, and how passionate you also are for your business and your vision to carry your vision and mission forward. So I think that being vulnerable and not being in a silo like we typically are, and not make each other think that we're going through this alone, but someone else also probably went through the same thing and can guide you through that process. So I think that would be one thing I can share with the group.
I think, Rhoda, I think you've summed it up really well. I think vulnerability is critical, and it's actually strength and not weakness. Lisa, I think from one of the things that I've learned, and I'm still learning, I think that's the first thing. I think everyone just, you never know everything. So just wake up every day knowing that you're going to learn something and accept that. Because I think we're quite critical of ourselves, women. You know, we don't know everything. Like, why don't we know it? And that closes us off to learning, which is the irony. But I think having absolute clarity on what you want, often works through the noise. And I think men often get further along the line because they're a bit more clear on exactly what they want. And I think demonstrating that we know what we want, why we want it, and where we want to go gives the people that we want to invest in us the confidence that they need to invest in us. I also think the other thing that I've learned is if you're not clear on your values, then you cannot align to somebody that has the same values. So be crystal clear and don't be afraid to walk away, because the moment you walk away, something else opens. And I think we clutch at straws because we're like, oh, it's not going to come along again. And I'm sure Amma can talk to this, where you don't want the wrong investors because they waste so much more time than if you just said no in the beginning and kind of went through that obstacle up front. So I think clarity is really important. And in fact, clarity gives you confidence. So if you don't have confidence, clarity actually breeds confidence, because if you are clear on where even if you're not clear on exactly where you want to go, but clear on what you won't stand for, that'll help you get a long way down the road.
Thank you very much for that, Kelly. So clear on your values, confidence, and a belief in yourself. So that leads me on to my next question, which is again open for all of you. What role does mentorship play in empowering women to seek and manage financial investments, or just, within themselves, that support that's needed?
Yeah, I think this comes back to the networking theme, right? Like, you need to, I've been approached by senior women who want to learn more about how young, I mean, I'm not that young anymore, but, younger women are doing things, they want to learn, and it's like a intergenerational conversation. So I think mentorship is super important, but it cuts both ways because things move so fast. It's hard to keep up, every day there's a new something, there's a new, there's a new buzzword, there's a new app, there's a new trend. So I think it's super important for women to really, boost their networking game, and also in terms of advocating for shifting the power, as they say, right? Like, how do we advocate for ourselves as women to ask for specific things? Like, if you're negotiating a contract with a funder, how do you push back? And it's hard to have these conversations sometimes. You're constantly having to push back, say, why would I need to send these 2 reports when I can maybe just send the 1 report? And the 2 reports are only different because there's only 1 column that's different. I mean, I've seen that. It's just utterly ridiculous. But the burden on us as women in our respective fields, I think we need to also, mentorship networks and really learning how to just advocate for ourselves around the tables that we find ourselves in. So I think that's super important to just be mindful of.
I think also being clear on what you want to be known for, as what you're saying, Emma, like that meant that marketing ourselves is also absolutely critical. I don't think we do it enough. And I think the other thing also that I've found from a mentorship perspective is mentors are meant to push you. If they are just acting as a psychologist and not giving you sound advice, they are not a mentor. A mentor is meant to be somebody, and the burden is not on the mentor. I think it's on the mentee. You have to create actionable points out of your mentor session so that you move forward. Otherwise, yes, there can be a sounding board, but there needs to be active listening and proactive action taking. Otherwise, that mentor relationship is not valuable. And yes, it's good for a mentor to be a mentor and say that they're a mentor, but the reality is that they need to drive that mentee forward. How are they doing that? So the mentee's got to take responsibility for that, like in any relationship. So I think mentorship is important, but I think a lot of people talk about mentorship, but it can't be fluffy. It's got to be clear. What advice can you give me? This is the issue that I have. And then you take that advice and you make the decision on your own. It's your decision. You have to own it. So I think that for me is, get yourself out there, be clear on what you want to be known for. And then when you find mentors, make sure they're aligned to where you need them to be. Is it finance? Is it operations? Is it HR? Is it strategy, vision, that type of thing? And then align.
Really good advice. I'm going to leave it there just because I'm conscious of the time, and I do want to hear from everyone who's joining us, so the audience that we do have. So for the next 5 minutes or so, I'm going to open up the floor to all of you. So if anyone has a question that they want to ask, you can either raise your hand, or I will have a quick look in the chat box and see what we have here. Gosh, we've got quite a few questions. Let me just scroll up. Hold on 1 moment. I will just pick any, unless I see anyone raise their hand specifically. Well, this isn't a question, but it's more of an agreement. I agree, Road. It's so important to be sure of your state before taking on investors. So a lot of agreement to what has been spoken. And I've got a question here. So one question, and it doesn't actually have a name. It's what would you say are the key barriers women face in accessing financial investment across a variety of sectors? I know we've touched on this, but this is a question that has just been put out there.
I can comment.
Yes, great.
So in terms of some of the difficulties that women face, I think it depends on the source of funding, right? So if a female entrepreneur is looking to raise funds from a traditional lender like a commercial bank, they'll require collateral. And in some instances, women may not have that. If you don't have landed property, for example, then you don't qualify to receive certain types of loans. More niche investors like venture capitalists, they invest in very specific types of businesses, right? So businesses that have the potential to scale. On the continent, they have a big preference for tech-enabled businesses. So again, depends on the type of business that the female entrepreneur is running. But I think these are some barriers that they can face. And one way to kind of jump over these hurdles is to understand all of the options that are available, understand grant funding, understand, the options available from traditional lenders, from venture capitalists, from private equity firms, and see which best fits your objectives.
Thank you very much for that. And I can see that someone has raised their hand. Zion, go and see if I can you can unmute.
Yeah, hi everyone. Thank you for having me. So my name is Zion Tadessa. So right now I'm trying to do farming in Ethiopia and beyond, growing my teff here. I have a restaurant in the United States. So my teff grain is a gluten-free grain, so it has so much demand here in the United States and Europe. But it's just, for me, I've been working on it with UC Davis and, research and development. And here I'm trying to find that fund, really like trying to help Africa, and instead of just trying to help themselves from, what we're trying to do. So I'm finding it so difficult for me to just get an investor to really invest in what I believe in, what I've been working hard for. Even if I do find investors, it would be they want to take like 20-30% of it. So how do we protect ourselves from investors who are trying to take our business at the same time? How do we get those investors who are really trying to help us? That's, for me, I do the work all the time, but it's just so hard to find that person who really believes in you and invest in you.
Thank you, Zion. Is there anyone that would like to answer her question?
Hey, hey Zion. I wanted to ask you one question. Have you heard of National Black Farmers Association?
Yeah, here in
The US.
Yes, in the US. But the thing is, I'm trying to just focus first, developing that first before, do you see what I mean? Even to just put my feet in the ground, just get my land and grow my teff. And then once I have the seeds, then I will be able to, share that. But right now, even with that association, they're looking for fund themselves too.
Yeah. But I think alluding back to what I previously said is like you have to understand like where you are at the stage of your funding process, right? So like for us, even though we've been around for 6 years, we don't want to get funded. We're still bootstrapping because we don't believe that we want to get an investor. And I can relate to you stating that when we do go and try to find an investor, they want to take 40, 50, 60% of the company because they see that, it's a lucrative market and they can make a lot of money. So they don't really see the vision. They just want to take control first. So finding the right investor, it takes time. It's not something that comes like that. It's more like you're shopping around. It's like dating, having a dating profile. You don't find your husband with the first date. So it's like, you keep looking, you don't kiss the frogs. You don't give them time of the day, because if they're asking you for 40% of your company, you don't want to give 40%. You walk away. You're not the right fit. So I think that having that freedom on your end to say no to an investor and then still continue with your vision and still continue to grow will give you more power when you find that right investor who wants to invest in you.
I would like, thank you very much for that, Rode.
So just follow up on that.
Pauline, did you want to add something to that?
Yeah, I was just gonna follow up on that, what she was saying, that what I'm thinking is, isn't there, like, for us, especially for Africans or even non-Africans who are trying to invest in Africa, wouldn't you think like there should be like some kind of bank who, America or Europe in investing? Because it's they owe us that debt. They used Africans to build Europe and America. So I think what I feel like we should demand is, like, for people who's been doing the work in Africa, the least they can do is put some money on the side so people like us can take advantage of. There is no fund like that where America or European putting for diasporas like us to really build our own continent?
Pauline, I would like to come to you quickly. I'm conscious of the time, so I'm understanding that you would like to respond to this.
Yeah, I think Rod said most of what I was going to say. It's really about finding the right investors, also looking at where you are in terms of the growth of the business at a very early stage, especially if you don't have a land or you have an idea, you have only business model. You really want to be talking to your friend, family, and fools, they call them. That's the first round. And then you probably want to be looking at angel investors. But depending on how much money you're raising and depending on the type of businesses, maybe you're looking for a debt. And this goes back to the whole debate that was being, had here. At the end of the day, we need to understand investors are looking for return on investment. You're either looking for a grant that they're going to come in, they like your story, and they give you money. But if you're looking for commercial investors, you need to show that you can actually generate the kind of return. So I'm sounding like taking a side of investor because that's what I do, but I think we also need to understand that investors have a criteria. So before you go and talk to an investor, do your homework as well. Understand, because you're going to waste your time. And then you're going to be frustrated because you're going to feel like they rejected you when actually you should not even have knocked on the door. And to your point, Zion, this is something I feel like it's a movement we need to create. And I think, again, back to the power we have a diaspora. If you look at how much money we send on the continent, we actually, the first funder on the continent, but because each one of us sends a small amount, we have no collective power to demand, as you said, this to happen. So maybe that's a movement we need to create as a diaspora. But today, there's no such fund. However, different countries, depending on where you are, they have incentive funding to support diaspora going back and setting up business back home. But usually it's in the form of grant or payable, loans. So that's what I can say within the time we have, and I'm happy to take this offline.
Great. Thank you so much, Zion, for that question, and for Rode and Pauline for answering that. So we have come to the end, but before we go, I would like each of you to, maybe in 30 seconds or less, to just say maybe like a call to action, a piece of advice that you would like to share. And I would like to start with Tochi.
Sure. Thank you so much. This has been such an engaging conversation. I'm really pleased that I was invited, and I've learned so much from the other speakers. The thing I would just say is I believe so much in the power of women entrepreneurs on the continent and in the diaspora. But I have to admit that there seems to be a gap in terms of our understanding of financing options, in terms of our understanding of, scaling businesses and getting it off the ground. And that's why platforms like this are so important. So if there's a way that we could take this conversation off of Zoom, just like Pauline was saying earlier, understanding what investment is right for what category. Many African founders also are hesitant to give out equity. So let's try and amplify the conversation off Zoom. But thank you so much for the platform. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Tochi. And I'm going to move on to Pauline.
Also, thanks so much for inviting me to be here. I think we really need to, whatever we do, to find a way to shift the power dynamics. And the way we shift the power dynamics is really being aware of what we have, and what we have is us here. Because when we sound like we're complaining, we're waiting for someone to do it. We can do it ourselves. You know, so let's actually start by looking at what do we do collectively. Once we lead, people can follow. But if we're always going to be waiting for people to come in, we'll be complaining forever. And I think for me, I'm looking for people who are tired of complaining, and we're just going to get things done. Reach out.
So reach out as Pauline's final word. Rhode, please do share your insights.
Thank you so much to ADN and to you, Lisa, for moderating this great conversation. We need to continue to have this great conversation. One advice that I would leave everyone here, and an advice for myself, is to continue to fight for your vision, and to not let anyone deter you from what you can see and they cannot see. So just because you tried to look for an investor and your first round you didn't find any, just keep going. That, you know, at some point in time you will be connected with the right person. It may not be today, it may not be tomorrow, but someday it will happen. As long as you keep moving forward, you will succeed. Just keep moving forward.
Thank you. And Kelly.
So I think, Liz, thank you so much for your moderation this evening. It's been a really good conversation, and to the ADN Network for having us on here. I think my only piece of advice would be motion. Just keep moving. And even when you get hit with the inevitable life challenges and work challenges, just keep moving. And moving is not always a sprint. It can be on your all fours and you are literally pulling yourself forward, and that's okay, because that's life. You know, it's not easy, and I think Pauline is dead right. I think we've spoken so much ad nauseum about what Africa needs. I think it's time that Africa did for Africa what Africa needs. You know, they stop relying on everybody else. I think we've got it in all of us. I mean, it's just incredible to, just from a Zimbabwean perspective, the Zimbabweans in the diaspora, I mean, I've got goosebumps thinking about it. They are unbelievable. Like the positions that they hold, it just, I'm always surprised at how much power we have in the diaspora just from one country in Africa. So I think for me, it's motion. Just keep going, and fail forward. Just keep going. Just keep going.
Thank you, Kelly. And Emma.
Gosh, no pressure, the last one. This has been great. Thank you again. All thanks to everybody watching, and to you, Lisa Marie, to you, Annie, and ADN for making this happen. I think we're already empowered. You know, we have everything the whole world wants. Like, everyone is here. Like, everyone's here, right? So why? What are we missing? We're missing coordination. We're missing our own self-belief, and the fact that we believe that we have the power already. It's just about coordinating. If you look at, you know, global north to global south remittances, is something like remittances outpace overseas development aid by 3 times. If you look at maybe $600 billion in you know, overseas development aid, remittances $200 billion. We're already doing it. How do we leverage platforms like ADN and our networks? And we're all networked, we're all connected, to really leverage the opportunity that Africa has for all of us and to unlock that potential. So yeah, thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Emma. And thank you to all of you, Pauline, Tochi, Kelly, Emma, and Rhode. Thank you for this insightful conversation that we've had. And thank you again for taking part in ADN's Women's Day event. So thank you to you all as well for tuning in, and thank you for the questions and for the messages that you've sent in the chat box. I think a few of the participants have messaged you back and put in their contact details. So continue to reach out to them. And thank you again.